Hi, Neil Sean here. Now, if like me you've adored all the stories about the wonderful Windmill Theatre in the heart of the West End, you'll know just before this terrible virus it was being, well, retransformed yet again. But I was lucky enough to sit down with a very beautiful young lady, still, Miss Jill Millard Shapiro, who was an original Windmill girl. She tells us all about her time working there and how she got the job. It's a fascinating insight into how exactly the Windmill operated in the very sort of final years. She also gives us a real insight into what it was like working for the infamous Vivian Van Dam. Now, I've been lucky enough to interview and meet lots of people who appeared at the Windmill and got their big breaks. But Jill tells us what it's really like and the people that she met along the way, including some infamous characters like Mrs. Shufflewick and of course unique talents like Ray Allen, Sir Bruce Forsyth and so many more. Sit back and enjoy this unedited, uncut chat with a real legend of the Windmill Theatre. Thank you so much for watching. Jill, it's lovely to finally meet you in the flesh.
At last.
You've recently just had a reunion, which I sadly didn't get
Yes.
to, but how did that go? Tell me about that.
It wasn't so much a reunion, we just did a little sort of appearance in Soho, above all places. And it went very well. People sort of quite liked seeing some of the girls who are still with us. And they did like seeing them and asking questions about how things were. And we showed little films. And it was nice. The actual reunions take place once a year in the summer, and they're private. They're just at one of the girls' houses. Oh. And that's lovely, seeing. And the Windmill boys, we mustn't forget them. It wasn't just the girls.
Let me ask you how you became one of the most famous dancers, girls in the world, really. How did that, take me back to how you got the role and how it transpired into your life, as it were.
Absolutely by mistake. Strolling down Archer Street in the spring of 1958, glancing up and seeing a sign saying Windmill Theatre stage door, and being very, very young, just naive, walked in and said, "Can I have an audition?"
So they hadn't asked you for an audition?
No.
And what did you do before that? Were you working or anything?
I was 14, I was still at school, I hadn't even left school. So anyway, I went into the stage door, and Ben Fuller was the stage door keeper. And he phoned upstairs to Van Dam's office, and Vivian Van Dam obviously said, "I'll see her." And I was taken upstairs to his office, and he asked me 2 questions. He said, "Can you dance?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Can you sing?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I like you. I'm going to take a chance on you." And he started to draw up a contract and had the secretary come up. And then he said, "You'll start such and such a date." And I said, "I can't. I'm at school. I'm still at convent school."
So he didn't know at that point? And
he didn't know I was 14. So he sent me home with a contract and a promise to return. So as soon as I'd left school, I went back.
You make that sound kind of easy, though.
It was.
Yeah, but it takes a lot of guts for a young girl when you think,
I'm not sure it was guts. I think it was stupidity. It was sort of just blindly walking into a West End theatre and asking for an audition. Yeah. What if he'd said, "Well, show me what you can do"? I hadn't got anything prepared. I wouldn't have known. What can you say?
Isn't that the best way in a way sometimes when you think, because...
Oh, it was wonderful.
We've all been for auditions, and you give you music and all. And it's terrifying because you've got that moment. When you're that young, you don't really care, actually. You think, no. Oh, well, if he fires me, at least I've been in here. And
Yeah, it's absolutely the bravery of youth, I think it is.
When you got the contract,
yes,
and you went home to your mum and dad, I mean, being so young, I dread to think what they must have thought when you produced the contract.
Well, I only had my mum. So there was just me and my mum, and I can't really repeat what she said. It was shock. But she said, "Oh, all right then." if you think you can do that. And she used to come to the dress rehearsals along with all the other mums. She loved it.
Oh, so
She absolutely loved it.
that's
Yeah.
nice actually.
Yeah.
It's
And she
really-
was wonderful about it.
Yeah, yeah. So when you eventually go back, you go back to school,
Yes.
do well at school, no doubt.
No, just left.
Was it hard then to concentrate at school because you knew that you'd already kind of got your career, if you like?
Yes, it was really. I wasn't bothered about it after that.
Yeah.
I was quite well educated, good convent schools.
Yeah.
But the minute those doors opened, off I went.
And were the other girls jealous, knowing that you'd got?
I didn't tell them.
Oh, so you kept it.
No, I just left and then turned up on stage at the Windmill Theatre. So that was a surprise for them, wasn't it? I'm still friends with some of them, yeah, I still see them.
And I love there's a story about when Mr. Van Damme found out that, of course, you were from a convent background, and
Oh,
he
he loved it.
offended. Tell me about the sort of how did it come round?
Yes, well, I got called up to his office, which was right at the top. It was his eyrie. It was like an eagle sitting up there. And I got called up there and I couldn't figure out why. I thought, I haven't done anything wrong, surely. But he said, I'm very angry. And why? Why are you angry? I've had a letter from the Mother Superior of St Mary's Convent, Woodford. It's still there, by the way. And she doesn't wish for her convent to be associated with your name and the Windmill Theatre. And he said, I'm a bit cross about it. But I could quite see Mother Superior's point of view. It must have been awful for her because suddenly all the press releases were convent girl in Windmill show, St Mary's Convent, Woodford.
Great PR though.
I know. So he continued till till the end when I left in 1963. The last press release said, "From a far cry from her Woodford Convent school days."
Did you ever
was
go
wicked.
back to the convent though?
Oh, I've been back since.
Yeah.
I went back on a reunion, but I haven't been back. I mean, it's different now. Obviously, this was a long time ago.
It must have been very strange though, because the Mother Superior going, "What? Where has this girl gone?" You know, it's like,
Do you know, I think I felt sorry for her, but he was not going to give in.
yeah.
He didn't see it at all. And he said to me, well, I'm proud of you, even if they're not.
That's a nice thing
Yeah.
to say though when you're young as well, isn't it? Because
Yeah.
if you're unsure about whether you've offended one and the other, sort of thing.
Yeah, no, but he didn't take any notice. He continued to use their name in the press releases.
Vivian
Naughty.
Van Damme had a sort of a reputation of being, shall we say, I think when you read the book about him, a pioneer really, very clever man, very astute for his time,
Very.
and I think, you know, when you look at pictures of him, immaculately turned out, very, very, I suppose, shrewd in what he was doing. What impression did he make of you? You know, he make on you when you met him? You know, and started to work for him. Was he father figure-ish?
No, he was somebody. It would be, I think, today a bit like meeting Simon Cowell. He could make you or break you, and that would have been the equivalent. You knew how important he was. He was dignified at all times, even if he was telling somebody off, he was dignified. But he did have a sense of humour. And the Van Dammes in general were very, very good people to work for. So they were wonderful as bosses, both of them, him and his daughter Sheila. So you need never have, he would always ask, how's your mum? And is everything all right? And so in that sense, they were very, very good bosses.
Yeah.
So we never had to worry about anything.
And the
Take
girls,
care of us.
sorry, I was going to say the actual company. They looked after you as I mean, like a
Yes.
brilliant company with health and you
Oh,
know
yes,
that sort of
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So talk me a little bit through that. How you
Well,
were
it
looked after as
didn't affect
girls.
me in any way. I was never ill. I think after Van Damme died, I had a cold, but I was there in the theatre and Sheila came into the dressing room and she said, oh, you've got a cold? So I said, yes, I have. So she said, do you want to go home? I said, no, I want to be here. She said, well done, you know, carry on. But they would have been concerned. And one of the boys collapsed in, yes, it was in the rehearsal room. He collapsed with asthma. He really was quite bad. And Sheila paid for 3 years for him to go to the London Chest Clinic. She paid for his treatment.
Wow.
For the 3 years that he was there in the theatre, she paid. He was only a young dancer, but she paid privately for him.
You wouldn't get
Amazing.
that nowadays,
No,
would you?
no. They were concerned, but Van
Yeah.
Damme was asthmatic.
Yeah.
So I think that realising how her father had suffered, she was aware of a young dancer like him and helped him.
The show itself, which you know, it's interesting because you only see old news clips. You know, it's the only thing you can see, and you see pictures and stuff. What was a production like? Tell me from like how you got the first sort of script to what you were doing to how it evolved. Because I mean, so to some people it might not have been changeable, but it was a changeable show, wasn't it?
Oh, it was, but it had the same format.
Yeah.
So the scripts were different, the music was different each time, and we did what we learnt in the rehearsal room. We did rehearsals one day and the show the next day because they ran two companies. There was A company and B company. So when A company was on stage, B company was rehearsing the next show and vice versa. You'd be given your script, you'd get a list of the scenes that you were in. But you weren't, if you were principal in one scene, you might also be covering one of the dancers, so you'd have to learn 2 parts, sometimes 3 parts within one scene. Because
quite
if somebody
hard
was
work
off,
then,
oh
yeah.
yes, it was very
Yeah.
complicated. It was beautifully worked out. So, but you just got in the rhythm of it and you learnt it all. And that was, rehearsals were tiring but good.
And what time would you start, say, on a normal day?
Well, for rehearsals, you could be there at 9 o'clock, having done the shows right until 11 o'clock the night before. 6 shows a day.
Yeah, so it's a long day.
It's a
And-
long day, but you didn't do the same numbers in each show
Yeah.
because
Was it-
they
was
had
it-
to give you time to go and have dinner or something, wouldn't
Yeah.
they? So.
But was a rehearsal day shorter then? Did you
Oh
finish at
yes,
6
yes,
or
it was
something?
till the afternoon, then you went home, so you had your evening.
Yeah. So
By
it's
then
just-
you were still learning your scripts for the next morning and get onto the show.
When you were younger and you were part of the show, when you said what you did people, I could only imagine that people must have thought you were terribly glamorous girls to have that, because it was, everybody knew what the place
Everybody
was.
knew what the windmill,
Yeah.
who the windmill girls were. They did. There was a strange sort of fame because you could sit on the underground and nobody knew who you were. You know, they wouldn't know your name or recognise you. You could go shopping and nobody knew. But the minute you said you were a windmill girl, oh, really?
Yeah.
Some people tutted a bit. It was a tiny little bit naughty, I suppose. Not really.
Not but
Not looking at it now. No.
And so I think there's a line that I read where, and I think this it came out of the book, and I'm sure you said this, that you said, although you were famous, it was the brand, if you like, that was famous. You were
Yes.
never, none of you girls were individually famous.
No.
Yet you would have been to people who went to the shows because you were regulars.
Oh, the fans, yes.
Yeah, you were regular girls, so it's kind of like they knew
Yeah,
that you know.
yeah.
So there would have been quite, I guess, a lot. And you know, we see with some of the pictures that you've brought, you're on the front cover of magazines. So
Yes.
your fame would have been rising, but maybe when you're young, you don't necessarily get that, do you? I don't think.
Oh, I did. I was quite surprised to see myself on the front cover of What's On in London. I thought, that's me.
Were you excited though?
Yeah, the news agent at Piccadilly Circus, the news vendor, I should say, he gave me the copy. I think it got wet in the rain.
That's
He gave it to
exciting,
me.
isn't it?
His name was Nobby. Can still remember him. Yeah.
Oh, so did you know people all
Oh,
around? So
yes.
everybody-
Everybody knew who we were.
Yeah,
So the news vendor was always telling people who was in the magazines.
yeah.
Some of the boys and the girls, and so you're in this week's such and such. 'Cause there was so much publicity all the time.
And you wouldn't, of course, been able to keep a track of that
No.
because you're doing
Sometimes
the show.
they did show us. Sometimes they have a copy and say, look, you're in this or you're in that. But mostly it was other people.
Yeah.
And people sort of in Italy sending a copy of a newspaper because you were in it, in Italy. So, you know, they were syndicated all over the world, all these pictures. They must still turn up somewhere.
But your mum must have been, absolutely. You know, talk to me about what your mum was like when you suddenly you'd got the job. You're now in this theatre, at this show, and you're becoming famous. Your mum would have loved that, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
She would have absolutely loved that. And she did love it. And my mother was sort of 5'8" of leggy blonde, born before her time, 1911 she was born, and really she should have been born a bit later with her looks. But I think she sort of just was so excited by it. And she just loved coming to the theatre and seeing the shows. But everybody's granny came. There were uncles and granddads and dress rehearsal day. The strangest hats in that theatre were all the little old ladies in their straw hats.
So it's not
Loved
really,
it.
I was going to say, it's not the myth of the stories that you hear about the windmill, I suppose in particular decades, would have been, it was full of guys. There's that famous quote by, I think, the actor Kenneth More, who says he was employed to shine a torch on certain guys, and then they'd have to bolt down the seats.
Oh, the seats, they had to bolt the seats down, yeah.
So talk to me about what happened with this.
The steeplechase,
Yeah.
because they could stay there all day. They bought their ticket midday and they could stay till 11 o'clock at night. So they sat through 6 shows a day, some of them. But if they were in the back seats, as people left in the front row, their aim was to get to the front row. So steeplechase, there were hurdles over the seats. So every night the seats were rocking because they really wrenched them from their moorings.
It's an interesting concept, that, isn't it, when you think now, Jill, to buy a ticket
dear.
for one show and be allowed
Yeah.
just, like now.
It was
it's like
non-stop review, that's what
Yeah.
it was called.
So is it-
Review Deville.
every
Yeah.
time the show finished,
Yeah.
another show started straight
Yeah.
away, more or
yes.
less.
Yeah, a little, sort of 10 minutes, I suppose.
Wow. And so, some of the many famous people that you've met but worked with, who I think one of my favourites was Ray Allen and Lord Charles, who I just, as a kid, thought was hilarious. I just thought
Yes,
it was
well,
wonderful.
Lord Charles and I had a thing. We had this little quiet affair, you see. Well, he was so realistic, that piece of wood, and it would swivel round on its neck, and it would leer at you, and it was very effective. This monocled, lecherous, inebriated dummy, and the eyebrows would move, and obviously it said strange things, like he would look back at Ray Allen and say, "Oh, she's a pretty little thing, what do you think?" And the eyebrows would go, and it was so realistic, but in this drunken slur. But the way it looked at me, if I was waiting in the wings ready to go on in my Aladdin costume, because I followed Ray, this thing would be constantly swivelling round and looking at me in the wings, and then looking back at Ray and sort of going, "Look, she's there." Never came to anything, our affair, I might add.
What was Ray Allen like as a person? I was lucky enough to meet him very briefly just a few years
Charming.
ago, and very dapper guy.
Very,
you
very
know,
immaculate.
Yeah,
Yes.
beautifully turned out. And I just kind of, it's strange in a way because ventriloquism had sort of gone out of fashion at that period when I met him. It wasn't, you didn't see it on TV anymore.
No.
Whereas when you think of people like Arthur Worsley and I can't remember the other, Dave somebody, I've forgotten his name. There were loads of them at that time doing it.
Yeah.
And to come up with Lord Charles was really different because
Fantastic.
you never had a posh doll, had you? You'd
No.
always had quite cheeky dolls, but not posh, you see.
See, my affair was with the young
Yeah.
Lord Charles before he went grey. If you noticed, over the years, the dummy aged,
Yeah, yeah.
which was very clever. But
And was Ray a shy person off stage?
I didn't see much of him, I must admit. But I suppose he was up in the canteen. But yes, very polite, didn't get involved with us in any way. I don't mean involved in any other way. I mean, it's, I suppose he did the 6 shows a day, every day. So he was just there throughout, and they'd get people, some of the acts would leave the theatre and then come back
Yeah.
just to get fresh air or go somewhere else, perhaps. But charming man.
When the acts came on like a comedian and they were booked for that period, they were there. Were they normally there for a week or like a month, or how did it work?
No,
'Cause
for the run of the show.
Oh, so would that be like
Yes.
6 weeks or something?
It could be about 9 weeks.
Right.
So
So
they'd
good
be there for the
booking.
run. Yes, but or they would just extend it into the next show. I mean, people like Arthur English was there for 32 years.